All right, people, welcome back to the Intermat Wrestling Podcast. And we are the Four Horsemen, as I've said a number of times. And we're here to talk some wrestling. Today, we're going to get into coaches' rankings, probably not the actual rankings, but the concept of them. Obviously, get into Iowa, Oklahoma State. And then we will talk about the All Star match that is going down tonight, the FloWrestling All Star card that they have. We'll dig into that. We'll make a couple of picks and discuss how well these cards have been going and how these leagues have been kind of sustaining. And I know Kyle Snyder put out a tweet yesterday talking about how good the PWL was, and he went 2-0 and everything else. So we'll dig into that as well as these kind of all-star leagues and these ways for our wrestlers to actually have sustainable lives and making money in wrestling. But as I said, first things first, let's dig into coaches' rankings. And obviously, we've had two or three iterations of them so far this season. The third one will be coming out when we get allocations in the coming days. But I think the consensus of coaches' rankings is that they are horrible. Coaches have way better things to do, and let's be honest here. Like I think it might have been Schwab that put out a tweet, and congrats to Schwab family for bringing home 2 state titles this year, both his sons winning. But I think it was Schwab that put out something about his email is now flooded from other coaches about these coaches rankings. I mean, all they're doing is looking at Intermat rankings, looking at Flow rankings, basically looking at WrestleStat and comparing all and contrasting, and then kind of making deals of, you put my guy here, my guy goes, and your guy goes here. Like, it's ridiculous. It's the dumbest thing that we truly have. And I know they have it in other sports too, but like, it's honestly really stupid, and we don't need it. These coaches don't know anything about doing rankings, nor do they care. So what are your guys' thoughts on coaches rankings? Kevin, I think you probably have a bit to say about it, so I'll let you kind of have the first shot. What are your thoughts on coaches rankings? Should they stay or should they go? What do you think of the concept?
Well, the only thing I wrote down on my notepad so far is that the Schwab family is undefeated recently. I feel like they're just absolutely killing it in every aspect.
Race walking.
Whatever their thing that they're doing is, they're crushing it, man. But no, I mean, like, the coach rankings, there's so many problems. Have you guys ever talked to a single coach that's like, yeah, I take it super seriously and I really try to do my best because that's the only way to maintain the integrity of this system that we have in place? Not one of them has ever said that. They don't want to do it. Like, it's a system that doesn't work without everybody actually trying to do it well. Mm-hmm. And as soon as a couple people just start screwing around with it, trying to do these backdoor deals or whatever kind of like issue it is, that, whether it's just, shenanigans or flat out ignorance and not caring about it, either of those two things as ingredients into this product that it's supposed to be, mess it up. And there is far more coaches that either don't want to do it, don't care about it, or are trying to manipulate the system than the ones that actually care about it. And as a result, it's a bad product. So,
I mean, you definitely have coaches who take it more seriously and dig into the research and try to do the best with it they can, but the system's broken. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it doesn't matter if we have a third of the coaches doing the right thing. It doesn't balance out the other 2/3 who don't give a shit and just copy down what they see online. Like, it just doesn't work. It's not valuable.
Yeah, no, we've talked about it all time offline, about just the politicking that goes on, kind of piggybacking off your points. It's, hey, I'll make a deal here. I'll rank your guy here. If you rank my guy here, this guy could use some help. And then sometimes you look at these rankings, you're like, where did this come from? This guy is at 30th on Intermat or Flow, and he's in the top 20 in the coaches rankings. Like, how does that work out? What is Flow and Intermat missing that this guy's ranked so high? And vice versa. You want to take a guy down at a school or coach you don't like, he's 20th or 21st in the rankings, and he's not in the coaches rankings. It's like, what's going on here? It's like you said, the system's broken. Something needs change. I'm not sure what that answer is, but like, to your guys' point, none of these coaches really like it. A few of them put in the time, and I just think there's a better way to do it.
Yeah, it's a waste of time, first of all, for them to have to worry about doing rankings at all. The thing that they should be probably focused on more than anything is their rules proposals. As I saw Colot put some rules and stuff and put a nice thread out. So if you have, if anyone, watching or listening to this hasn't seen that, go check that out on Twitter. But the coaches rankings, as you said, like it does go both ways where it's, put my guy here, I'll put your guy here, or you do have coaches that aren't ranking guys at all, right? To give their own guy a leg up. And it's just like this part of it shouldn't hold as much weight as others. So I don't know. I think something in within that definitely has to give. Like I don't think we need to have a coach's ranking at all, because it slows the process down, right? And if you do want to have some sort of other metric, allow the rankers to truly do it. And obviously, Intermat Flow, they're already putting their rankings out there, but like if you bring in some of the other rankers that aren't doing rankings periodically or weekly or whatever else, like it's Kozak for Flow and it's Earl for us. Bring in Willie, bring in Win Magazine, bring in some of these other guys that are paying attention to the sport to at least give some other semblance that you're doing the work instead of the coaches. Because even though the coaches have a ringside seat to the action, they do not care, or do they really put in a lot of thought of where guys should be ranked unless there is some sort of email being sent or politicking that is going on, or they're trying to get a leg up for their own guy. It just doesn't, it shouldn't hold as much weight as it does.
Well, let me ask this too, because this is admittedly my own ignorance here, right? Like I've never really paid attention to this whole thing because I've literally never heard anybody say that this is a system that works. So I'm surprised that it's still here and we still have to have this conversation. But the whole idea is that the coaches rank these people and that's supposed to affect the allocations somehow, or what is the desired outcome of this happening to begin with?
The coaches rankings have a weight on the allocations. So if they're
Okay.
in the coaches rankings, they meet the RPI standards and the win percentage standards, like it gets an allocation for the conference.
Okay. So why are we having people whose livelihoods depends on this doing this? You know what I mean? It's their job. Their job is to make their guys look better so that they can hopefully have more qualifiers, so that they can help their guys obviously like reach their goals. Obviously, that's kind of what you're doing. But you're also trying to get paid and keep doing this job, right? Like it's not, they're not mutually exclusive, right? Like it's the same thing. It's just how you bottle it up. It's a conflict of interest as well. So there's another point as to why it shouldn't exist.
It's kind of like a
And
teacher allowing a kid to grade his own test.
I fully support that because it's less work for me. So, but that being said, like even within the media, like I'm not going to pretend that I watch every single duel and know everything about wrestlers across the country. I pay attention to my conference almost exclusively. Clearly, I watch other duels and I watch other teams and I watch other conferences, but I'm not putting the same amount of focus on them as I am on the ACC teams. And I
Well, it's
wouldn't
easy.
expect
You get
that.
3 champions. It's pretty cool. Big
Look,
Ten only had 1.
we'll talk about that in a minute. We'll get to that. But like realistically, Earl does a great job with it. Kozak does a great job with it. It's a shitload of work to do rankings, like to put the time in to actually research this and dedicate the time to doing it well. Takes a lot of time, takes a lot of effort, and takes somebody who's really focusing pretty much solely on that to do it as well as you can. And we have people in our sport who do that. We have people who do it in different ways. You look at, Britt does it with mathematical formulas and stuff. So, why we can weigh that too. Like there's people who have the outlook on this sport that we can utilize to make this the best product possible. Why aren't we doing that? Why are we putting it in the hands of people who pay even less attention to other conferences, other teams, because it doesn't affect them? And like Kevin said, it's the onus is on them to be successful and to get as many of their guys through as they can. So they're going to rank them higher. They're going to rank their conference guys higher because it's going to help the conference and earn an allocation. Like it benefits them. So why wouldn't you do it? Like even if you're trying to do it as well as you can, I'm still going to give preference to my conference so I can get another allocation here and there if possible.
These are the most maniacally competitive dudes you'll be able to find, right?
Schwab and Brands were race walking at the Iowa
Yes.
State tournament because that's how competitive they are. Like that's the kind of people we're talking about.
All right, guys, be unbiased in your rankings. Really, shut everything out. No, that doesn't
And
work.
that
Yeah, like
it's
go
we
ahead,
talked.
Austin.
I say we talked last time a little bit about it too. Like, why is the coaches' rankings the only ranking that the NCAA uses for allocations? Make that another ranking on top of Intermat, on top of Flow.
Yeah,
I'd
why
throw
not average them?
in there, and I'd throw WrestleStat that uses a lot of the algorithms and mathematical points, and then you throw out the highest or the lowest or whatever. You find an average, and then boom, that's your rankings.
You
It's
borrow Malinsky's abacus to put them all together,
exactly.
and problem
Yeah, I just
solved.
think there should be more rankings that, coaches' rankings isn't the sole ranking to be used.
Let the nerds do the rankings nerd do the ranking nerd things
Yeah,
and
nerds.
keep the coaches out of it, right? Like it's it's insane to me that this is still a thing, right? Like it shouldn't be a thing, but it is. And like you're trying to tell me that as you guys have said, these are very competitive men, grown as competitive men that don't even want to give you their injury status on a guy, even though we'll probably find out that a guy has a weakness, right? Like I I I was like, oh, Ja'Cory Teemer's wearing a brace on his shoulder. Cool. Like
And
knew
his thumb
And
and
everywhere else.
everywhere.
right?
He had more
Like
brace than single.
everything was taped up, and it's like, you know, if there was some sort of injury, like we would have known all of these things, whatever else. But like if and I said a lot of these things are happening in secret when we find out a guy is banged up. It's the same thing that's happening with the coaches' rankings. So it's just, there's not a lot of transparency when it comes to anything that goes on because these guys are as competitive as they are. And the same is going to go on when it comes to these coaches' rankings. It's pretty wild to think that, in the year 2025, we're still relying on this sort of metric. Like, let the rankings nerds do the rankings nerds things. It's the reason why Willie does seeding for the number of tournaments that he does seeding for, from 8-year-olds to 18-year-olds. There's a reason why he does that. There are people that are digging into this every single second of every single day. Like, as soon as we get to a threshold where RPI becomes a thing, it is talked about every day within wrestling Twitter. So like, allow those people to get into a room and figure out what these things should look like. There's a reason why it used to be ranking top 20, I think, is where it used to stop. And now they're like, well, why don't we just go all the way to 33, since that's what we're going to have the NCAA tournament, so that it at least, and honestly, that was being done for the coaches, as much as it was like, hey, here's the 33 guys that could potentially be in the bracket. That was also done for the coaches, because the coaches every single year were like, okay, hey, we have your top 20. And I know this for a fact. Coach would be like, we have your top 20. Who's your 21 through 33? Now it's like, we can look at the rankings and we can see it, and if they need notes, they can ask, Kozak or Earl or Piles or whoever for notes. So coaches ranking, it should not hold as much weight as it should. And I don't even think these guys even like doing them.
It's too bad Fretwell doesn't do rankings. Then we could have cliff notes.
Trust me, if there's no way you would want Fretwell doing rankings.
That would be hilarious. It would be hilarious.
Yeah, there are some hilarious things said during duels in our text thread, that it would be pretty awesome to do, to have him doing some sort of rankings. I try to get him to do more content, but he's being super creative right now. So I think once that his creative notions are kind of off the ground, he'll maybe come back and do a little bit more content with me. But for right now, we're gonna I'll settle for getting nice hoodies and stuff like this, and crew necks like this.
He has my address. Just remind him of that.
Hey, I'm still waiting on the newest wrestling department stuff to come out. I'm a little jealous. There's a lot. I mean, obviously the wrestlers should get it first, but I need to be on that list of things. But there's a lot of cool stuff coming out from Compound. Obviously, I'm a big Compound guy. I love that guy. He's like a brother to me. So, I'll always plug everything that my friend is doing. But let's jump off of a terrible conversation of coaches ranking and jump to Iowa versus Oklahoma State. This was fireworks, and I don't just mean the pyro that they had going on in the gym. This was fireworks from start to finish. Some of our picks really did hit. I was particularly happy that Cooper DeJean was in the building, as I had said last week.
A solid call.
That was a solid call. So I was pretty happy about that. But when it came to the wrestling, there was no disappointment whatsoever. And I mean, let's start with 84. We had mentioned, we started with 84 in our preview discussions. We're going to start with it again. We had said that there was a good chance that we were going to see Angelo, and that you don't look at the probables and have any sort of inkling of whatever it is going to happen at 84. What did you guys make of, it coming out, prior to the duel that Angelo was going to go? And then what did you make of his performance up against Dustin Plott?
I'm glad they didn't try to like pull it off like it was some big secret. I think that would have been more annoying if like, oh, they both weighed in and then, oh, here, we're just going to send him out. And I don't know. He wrestled well. He was a more offensive and finished the only takedown. It's a big position to be put in, and he did what he had to do. So there's not a lot you can take away from that. Like he did his job.
Yeah, I was talking with Austin yesterday. He was on the Blood Round podcast. Shout out. Check that out if you haven't already.
Yeah, they talk mad shit about me. It's not okay.
Oh, yes. Because we knew we were never going to. Yeah. It was like, well,
I'm on next week, so we'll see.
That's right. That's right. But yeah, so like we talked about it. And I think the main thing that really stood out to me is, despite the like physical talents that the Ferraris, and I'll say both of them have, like they are very patient with when they use it, right? He wasn't just going out there firing off crazy shots. He does get down to the knee a little bit more than I'd like, but he's still hand fighting, still engaging and everything. And he got to those legs 3 or 4 times in that match. Like I don't recall if Plott was ever on his legs. If so, it was once. But it was him being the more aggressive wrestler, making things happen. He finished that first takedown just so cleanly. And then the second one, he had to be very, very persistent and just keep fighting for it and keep fighting for it. And it was just impressive, man. It was impressive. I don't know what you were doing if you were Plott. I mean,
walking into a shot every time.
Yeah, like
plotting, if you will.
I will that use that pun. But I don't know. I think if you wrestle that match again, it's coached up differently, and you're trying to do some different things to crawl up an arm 2-on-1, something to make it a little bit harder for him to just sweep in on your leg. But I mean, it was patient. It was well planned out. It was executed really, really, really well. But yeah. And well, this is the other thing I said to Austin yesterday too, is now do you actually start thinking about what you do for NCAAs and Big Tens? That's a big win.
No. Yeah, I don't think Plott gets enough credit for that third period ride out too. Everyone
that was impressive.
Ferrari's win, but Plott had some big balls there to ride him out, and that final scramble rolling.
Yeah, that scramble was awesome.
Yeah, it was a great way to end that match. Really needed to ride out, and he did. But yeah, to piggyback off Claunch's point, 2 or 3 weeks ago, Brand said Arnold was the guy at 84. He's our guy. Ferrari has 5 matches. He's not going to wrestle cupcakes. And then fast forward to this weekend, Brand seems like it's still up in the air of who's going to go at Big Tens. So that's probably a separate discussion, but if you're Gabe Arnold, what are you thinking? It's like, hey, I was told this was my spot. Maybe I'm not performing as well as Ferrari. He says we're brothers. We had that Twitter or Instagram post I saw, which is great, but deep down, you got to be maybe doubting yourself a little bit. Am I the guy? Am I at the right weight class? What's going on here? So, yeah, I mean, great way to end overall. Great way to end the duel for dual meet season. I think it was not many better matches that, could have ended the dual meet, regular season like that.
Yeah, this weekend had some great dual finishes to end it off. It was a good weekend to end it on.
I think when it came to 84, and I'm gonna touch on a point that a lot of people were talking about was Ferrari stalling.
Drives crazy.
Yeah.
And you can I don't think that it is one or the other, right? Because Ja'Cory Teamer fired off shots and he got hit with stalling, right? Like I think that Parco should have been hit with stalling on top because he was riding the hips and he had a 2-on-1 and just was riding on top, but didn't work that way, right? I didn't think Ja'Cory Teamer should have been hit with stalling because Ja'Cory Teamer was firing off literally the only attacks, but his attacking style is to kind of retreat a little bit and lure you in. Ferrari's is similar in retreating, but it is a very closed off style of wrestling, of dropping to a knee. I'm hesitant to say he was stalling, but it wasn't like it was. I will say that against Starachi, it was stalling. He was trying to slow Starachi down because Starachi is a more dynamic scorer than Dustin Plott. Against Dustin Plott, it's a tactic that worked perfectly, and the only thing that it looked like Plott was ready for in that instance was essentially covering his eyes so that he couldn't really get to his legs, but that didn't really work considering he's shooting low anyway, and you're walking literally right into his legs. So like he wrestled a very smart, and aggressive tactical match. He looked like the better guy outside of the very tough ride out from Plott. Ferrari looked like the better guy. He was on his legs. He was more aggressive with his shots. Do I like that he dropped down to a knee? No. Is it considered negative wrestling? Yeah, because in freestyle they stand you up. You're not allowed to do that. But it's a completely different style. Which we saw at 33 was a very big part as well, is that styles make fights. But like Ferrari was just better in that match. He was more equipped for that match. And if they would have put Gabe Arnold out there, I do not think that the match then comes down to heavyweight and it goes in Oklahoma State's favor. That won the match. Now, I I see a lot of people saying a legend was born. A legend was born. When it comes to that rivalry and that night, yeah, legendary. But like, don't allow a moment to build, a statue already, right? Like, he's still a freshman. He's had a very big moment, and I'm not taking anything away from that, but I'm saying allow his full career to pan out before you call the kid a legend. But he wrestled phenomenally, and he wrestled exactly the way that Iowa needed him to, minus being ridden out in that entire second period. That, as Austin said, was big balls by Dustin Plott. So
Yeah.
hats off to Ferrari. I think they made the right decision, and it probably does. I don't think it. That's the thing, is I didn't think that it was going to change their mind of who goes, but with what Brand said after the match, it does add a question mark back in there now, right? So let's throw this out there. What do you guys think happens at 84 in the postseason now that you saw how Ferrari has performed? Do you think that maybe they have a wrestle off? Do you think that they change their minds in any way? Or do you think that they stick with Arnold? Is they stick with the other one? Bless you, Austin. Do they think that they stick with the other statement of Arnold is the guy?
I think if they want Gabe Arnold to be there next year, he goes in the postseason. I think if they backtrack off of that and they put Ferrari in, he goes in the transport portal. He's transporting in the transfer portal immediately because they're not holding their word. They're saying that it's his spot. He's going to be the guy to go in the postseason. And then all of a sudden, because Ferrari has a good win, we're changing our mind. I wouldn't want to stick around. And maybe he feels differently, but that would be a pretty big slap in the face to me.
It's tough because it's wrestling, and if you win the challenge match, you should have the spot. assuming that's the plan, right? I think ultimately, regardless of what you're told at the end of the day, I mean, we're there's again incentives for winning national championships, right? In the perfect world for Iowa, they could have 5 finalists, right? You get 133, 149, 157, 197. I feel like there was another one in there somewhere.
65.
65, you know? Like that's if everything goes great in March, 5 finalists, right? And so now all of a sudden you're talking about maybe getting a guy who can place top 3, top 4 versus another guy who's, I think Gabe Arnold can be an All-American. And if he has a great tournament, could place top 5, top 6. But he's been struggling lately. So, I think it probably starts with a coaches meeting. You talk this out, you figure out if this is even liable or makes sense or what the decision is, because ultimately you don't want to put that in the kids' hands and toy with their emotions too much at this point in the season. This is kind of pivotal part. So it starts there.
Yeah, I think it depends on, what Iowa wants out of Angelo Ferrari. If they want him to help compete for a second place trophy and maybe distance himself from Oklahoma State this year, then yeah, he's the guy. But if you want that guy to be a 4-time NCAA champ, you keep his red shirt on this year and let Carter graduate, you let Parker graduate, and you let Plot graduate. That weight class clears out a lot next year, so like I said, if you want Ferrari to be the man coming back next year, be number 1 or number 2 at that weight class, I think you keep his red shirt. But like Claunch said, Gabe Arnold isn't a slouch. He's probably gonna be an All-American. It's just whatever they do isn't gonna bring them over Penn State. So I think they had to keep that in mind as well as the team.
I don't see their ceilings being much different. Like, I don't think there's a potential that either of them could be in the finals. I wouldn't put that down on paper. Like, that's not what my assumption would be. I would say, we're looking at third, fourth place as a ceiling for either of them. And is it worth burning that full year, especially with the recruiting classes that you just landed? Is it worth burning that year and not having it down the line? Like, not having him as a starter in 4 years when Bassett's there? Like, let's be, you got to think long term, especially if you're really working towards knocking Penn State off. It's not happening this year. Unless they completely shit the bed, that's not happening. So you can't bank on that. We've seen that Penn State is successful in the postseason. They're very likely not getting knocked off this year. I think it makes a lot more sense to plan for the future, make a long-term investment in him, which seemed like what the plan was initially. So that was my thinking on it.
Yeah, I think they stick to the plan. I
The
do.
one
I
other
think.
point,
Go ahead.
just the one other point I want to make too, just about the getting down on a knee piece. Like, I don't necessarily like it as much either, but it is incumbent on the ref to dictate the pace of the match. It's not
Noise the shit.
Ferrari's fault. He's not going to stop doing it unless somebody with a level of authority on the mat tells him to stop doing it. So that was it.
Yeah, and you could tell Plot was kind of out of sorts with that because and
he's expecting it to be called stalling.
Yeah, I've dealt with that guys in my career too. Guys on the knee, it kind of limits my offense. Maybe I like to wrestle from space a little bit, hit your fakes and whatever you want to do to get to your offense, and you can't do that when the guy's on the knee, right? So you have to change how you wrestle. It really limits the offensive guy if you're down on the knee, and especially if you're backing up a little bit, boom, you fire off a shot. Okay, I avoided stalling, but what would you do before that? You're kind of backing the edge a little bit, backing the edge, and then I go back and forth on it, but I'm always one that says if you're on a knee, you got to come back, make an effort to come back up, or ref needs to get involved a little bit there.
My thinking is like two things can be true, like you said, Holmes. He could be the more offensive wrestler, which he was, but he can also be stalling every time he drops to a knee because he's not just dropping to a knee to set up a shot. Every time he drops, he's sliding back 3 or 4 steps and going to the boundary. He's creating space for himself that way. He's creating safety for himself by going to the boundary. I mean, by definition, those are stalling tactics. It doesn't matter that he's firing off more shots. He's still stalling prior to that. And like you said, Kevin, it's on the ref to do it. And we've seen time and time again that call is not going to get made in Carver. And we know that. So it's hard as, and I'm going to come off like an Iowa hater again because apparently that's my new shtick. Um, it's hard to see refs get influenced by the crowd like they do, or they seem to at Carver. You don't see that other places. They definitely have the atmosphere they have there is difficult to wrestle in, and I assume difficult to officiate in, and they seem to be swayed by the crowd more so than they are in other places.
Yeah, when Ferrari wrestled Starachi, he dropped to a knee, but obviously the way that Starachi wrestles, he's not walking into a low level shot the same way that Plot did, right? It's not a same stance, it's not the same pressure, and Starachi was able to get a stall warning on Ferrari because he just kind of backed him straight off the mat, kept his hands in front of him, kept his hands low. You can't shoot through that. Like you're not going to shoot through underhooks. You're not going to get to my legs. And I mean, not for nothing, Srirachi's the best defensive wrestler or best wrestler in the country. Defensive, offensive, no one scores takedowns on Carter Srirachi. He literally had to have one leg last year in order for anybody to do it. So like just very, very different. But I do think that in this match, that Ferrari was able to be aggressive from a knee, but we've seen it go both ways. We've seen how he wrestles Tarachi. I think it goes a very different way if he wrestles Parker Keckeisen, honestly, because Parker has a very different style. And not for nothing, even though Srirachi is as good as he is, I don't think anybody makes adjustments like Parker Keckeisen in match. And I say that mostly because you'd never really have to see Carter Srirachi make adjustments, right? Like maybe the first thing doesn't work, that he knows the second thing will. Whereas we've seen Keckeisen wrestle guys, and it's like, damn, this isn't working. This isn't working. Like I have to transition. I have to make some changes. I have to figure something out, and he does it within his style. So that's why I think that match with Keckeisen wouldn't go the same way that it just did with Plot. But I feel like Plot got a little overwhelmed. I feel like he was prepared to wrestle Angelo Ferrari, though. I don't think that they prepared, just like Srirachi. I don't think they prepared for Gabe Arnold, because they probably didn't really feel like they had to. He'd already wrestled Gabe Arnold. He knows what that feel is. He knows how to get to his stuff. He beat him 5-1 last year, so wasn't that big of a deal for him. Not to say Gabe Arnold's not that big of a deal, but I think preparing for the unknown of what Angelo was going to bring is probably what he prepared for more, because you saw him putting his hand in his face and just trying to shield his eyes and stuff like that. But that's only going to go, that actually hinders your offense more than it hinders his, because he's used to wrestling on a knee. You're not used to wrestling with your hand in front of a guy's face like that. So I thought, Ferrari wrestled a great match. It obviously came down to it. They needed that one in order to, to seal it, because you knew Buchanan was going to, go out and do what he's done the entire year. And Ferrari's win, and I want to get to the rest of the matches now. Ferrari's win is what rendered any other bonus points that Oklahoma State got or didn't get completely useless. Like, I went back and I looked at it, and I do think that Spratley did have the tech, to be completely honest. The referee said that he didn't have enough separation, so they didn't give him that final takedown, which I think was wrong.
Yeah.
But when you look at that, that's 1 point. When you look at what was it, 60 or 74? I think it was 74, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
1 point away from a takedown.
Hamity 1 point away. Like that wouldn't have really made that big of a difference either, because that's one more point as well, and not two. So like, they lost by 5, so it wouldn't have really made up for those points. They needed that match from Ferrari, or giving up less bonus points where they did, with giving up, losing to Ayala, losing, Caliendo, getting the major at 65. That's what made it a bigger difference than anything, is what they really truly needed. So, but let's jump to down to 33. What did you make of throwing out Sakamoto at 33? And was it a good thing or a bad thing that they did this?
I don't think it had any impact on the team score either way because I think Whitcraft would have been a similar situation. Maybe he wouldn't have got majored, but probably would have the way Ayala's been wrestling. Um, it made more sense when you get the explanation that it would impact his RPI and would lose an allocation. That makes sense because they're protecting his allocation for next week. Okay.
And the conference as well.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. Like that's not optimal. Um, but it was a cool experience to see somebody from a different style. I mean, I can't imagine having my debut match in folk style be at Carver Hawkeye in front of 15,000 people in a number 2 versus number 3 duel. But
Not speak the
he
language.
wrestled well. He was fun to watch. Like,
Dude,
I didn't know anything about the guy, but
he went after it. He was
Yeah.
just like, YOLO, and just just tried to go do something. He did that cartwheel out of a whizzer. He was just flying all over the place, man. I was like, I don't know who this dude is, but I like him.
I think he's going to be really good.
Yeah, he's going to be awesome.
he wasn't even that bad on the mat either.
He's already good. Obviously, he's he's won world medals, world champion. But like folk style, I think he's going to be good. That's what I mean.
Yeah,
he didn't have the issues on the mat that I would expect from a non folk style wrestler. Like he wasn't great, but he was able to build up and able to get escapes, which was hard. It's a hard thing to do if you've never done it.
Yeah, no, he was awesome. I had no idea it was coming out. I was just like, all right. And then I was like, well, who's he replacing? Like Reese Whitcraft, and no knock on Reese, but it's like he's probably not going to beat Drake Ayala, like you said, Robbie. So it was sweet. I loved it. It was fun to watch the dude. I can't wait to watch him again next time. And I just thought too, going back to Gabe Arnold real quick, how funny is it that similarly they don't beat Iowa State the year before unless Gabe Arnold uses one of his matches to come in there and beat Feldkamp. So now both those guys have that opportunity. How cool is that? They are brothers.
Fairy tale.
Yeah, Sakamoto, like you said, came out firing, just a little unorthodox, just felt comfortable in these weird positions, which I think until Ayala got used to it, got a good feel for it, then he started ramping it up. But, Sakamoto almost had that first takedown, I think, and then maybe one later on where that throw by that Ayala does, overtime shrug, he's so good at it, but the way
nasty.
Sakamoto like sticks his leg out, gets his hips involved, he almost gave Ayala some fits there.
Agreed. Yeah, I think it was the outside of the RPI, right? When you look at styles, and I saw somebody who was like, let's look at the full context. Like Sakamoto's been in huge matches, and he might be the senior level rep if he wins this one tournament this year. Like he could be at the world championships. It's like, yes, but like this is a completely different style. Like folk style and freestyle, even though there's a lot of similarities and we see our guys do well. Jordan Burroughs way better at freestyle than he was at folk style. Like, let's kind of dial it back on trying to say full context of these things, because he is not used to being in this sort of environment where there's three phases of a folk style wrestling match. He's only used to top bottom and he's only used to parterre and being on his feet. That's it. Right? Like, that is the only thing that he's used to doing. Now he's got to be active in the entire match. And that's why he looked tired. Right. And that's why he was just like, man, like this is weighing on me incredibly right now. But I do give him props for going out there and doing exactly what I think they expected him to do, which was bring a different style and a different energy to that match. Ultimately, it didn't work out. And I don't think there's too many people that really expected it to work out, but everybody was like, okay, let's see what we got. And he came out fire and he's doing cartwheels and shit. And everybody's like, oh, okay, what the hell is this? Right. Like it was a little different, but I don't think that they expected an upset there. It's the returning national runner up, right? Like I understand.
And he minimized the damage too. Like
he did. He certainly did. Like, and I understand like the context of me saying it's the national runner up doesn't plot national runner up, but Ferrari wrestles the exact same style. You know what I mean? There's very big difference in those two matches. So I think he did what he was supposed to do too.
it's with it kind of takes the crowd out of it for a minute too, because then everybody in Carver's like, what the hell is this shit? Like, what is
Yeah. Yeah.
who is this guy?
Why do
What
they have
is
cue cards?
it's like in The Simpsons when
That was hilarious.
That was
there was
awesome.
the Japanese mafia and there was the one little dude in the white suit and Homer's looking at him through the window and he's like, the little guy hasn't done anything yet. I want to see what he's gonna do. And then as soon as they close the door and leave, he does some flip and kills some people. Yeah, that was Rin
Yeah.
Sakamoto.
Yeah, it was awesome. It was really cool to see. I think he's going to be really good for them at 33 in the coming years. When you saw all the different storylines and bits and pieces coming out, and everybody's like, they weighed in Rin Sakamoto, like everybody was like, well, shit, do you think we'll actually see him wrestle? And then like it kind of was WWE-esque where he came running down the tunnel. And like they had to go get him, and he's running down the tunnel and throwing on his headgear. I thought it was great, but he was pretty. I mean, he is being ridden out by Drake Ayala, somebody who is very good on top, but like he did do well, on bottom. It wasn't like when Echemendia made his debut and he looked completely confused and he had no legs and no energy whatsoever. So big deal for him to kind of make his entrance in Carver. I don't think there's any bigger time to really make your entrance, but yeah, that was not probably it probably was it was the best decision for them when it comes to the entire story, but I don't think it wasn't a make or break of the dual sort of situations. What other matches? I don't want to bombard all the time. What other matches did you guys watch where you're like, man, like this one was a big one? I mean, obviously all of them, but what kind of stuck out to you guys?
I'd
I kind
like
of made. Oh, go ahead, Austin.
to say 74, just Hamity kind of struggling first little bit there. I'm not sure if he had to take down the first Peter or not, but he had to kind of switch up what he was doing to get to Brance's legs and ultimately get that takedown. But again, even it seemed like that crowd maybe wore him out a little bit because there was about a minute left in the match. He needed a takedown. He wasn't really trying to get one. I'm not sure if that was nerves, being tired, or just couldn't find an answer there. But if you're Hammy, you got to get that major. But props to him for kind of making some adjustments there and going to something different besides an ankle pick to get that takedown. And I think he had a few more, obviously, too. But yeah, so it was good for Hamity to switch it up, make adjustments mid-match, and go get some takedowns there.
Yeah, I was just gonna say 57 was fun for me. I mean, Teamer is awesome. He's got great takedowns. He's so fun to watch and explosive. I was joking with Austin, like he just was a mummy, just wrapped up. Like, and obviously, like the guy Austin made a good point yesterday. He's been competing in college for so many years. I remember the first time I remember seeing him competing in college. I think it was in the semifinals, maybe of Midlands in a redshirt year against Kolodzik from Princeton, and it was like an overtime match. And I think Kolodzik was ranked like third in the country or something. And it's like, oh shit, this guy's gonna be good for a long time. But no, yeah, and it's fun to watch him compete. And then the clash of styles there too, because Caleb Fish is just a bruiser. He's just gonna
Mm-hmm.
step forward and club and snap and club and snap and hope to get to an angle in the leg. So watching those two go back and forth was super fun. And then obviously Teamer getting the win at the end was the right outcome. So
Yeah, 74 was the surprising one for me. I expected more from Hamidi, just kind of from what we've seen from him all year. But we hit on it last week with saying, if Brands goes, he's a lot stingier. So it's going to be harder to get that bonus point, and it was. And that's so shouldn't be too surprised, but it certainly wasn't the attack rate that we've seen from Hamidi all year.
I agree with that. I mean, at 57, Teamer, he has been around for so long. And he has such a lax style. I'll always go back to his Who's Number One match where it's funny to think of now, but when he wrestled Mitch Moore at Who's Number One,
jeez.
and the fact that those two were the same weight class is ridiculous. But he wrestled Mitch Moore at Who's Number One, and he stood up straight with his legs just completely wide open the whole match. because he knew Mitch Moore wasn't going to shoot. And he's
He
like,
wasn't wrong.
he just wants to pull me into a front headlock. He doesn't want to do anything else. So I'm just going to stand up this entire match. And everybody kept getting mad because he was just baiting him into a scramble. And when Mitch did grab his leg, Corey sat the corner and everything else. He's that same guy. And you see him now retreating. He's not like fully down in a stance every time. But when he does get down into a stance, he's blasting through guys like we saw him do to Fish right away.
Mm-hmm.
So like, even though he's banged up, he's wrapped up like a mummy, he's still firing, and the quickness is still there. He's probably still quicker injured than some guys are at 100%. So, that was seeing him walk out on the mat, knowing he's just like fighting through injury, right? His thumb is taped up, shoulder brace. The other, lower body injury that he had earlier on in this season where he could barely walk off the mat. Like, he is battling everything. And to see him still firing off shots the way that he did was just like super impressive. But the match for me, I'm going to go right in between the two that you guys already talked about. And that was Caliendo and Amin. And I know Amin got hurt, got a little banged up, but the last time those two wrestled, it was a 1-point match, and Caliendo just like blew the doors off this time. And that was impressive because, as I said, it was 1 point before. And this time he made sure that he was going out for bonus points, and he was obviously feeding off the crowd and everything else. So that was really impressive because you continue to see at 165 more than anything, you see the tiers of wrestlers more than anything. Messenbrink is at the top, and he absolutely dismantled Caliendo. Caliendo is 2 and Amin is 6. They're not very far off from each other, and he majored him, right? Like, just like the tiers in 165 is just incredible. So that was like very eye-opening for me because I was going into it thinking, all right, Cam Amin is in a new regime this year. He's looking better than he did last year, where he was having a little bit more of a hard time. And no, didn't even matter. Caliendo has obviously, he's going to jump levels too, but it was just like, he looks great, right? Like the guy that wrestled against Messenbrink, I don't know whatever, Messenbrink is doing. It's incredible because Caliendo just looked amazing against Amin to get the major. So that was the one that like really stuck out for me, where I was like, man, like he is really tough to beat. So it also makes you have more respect for what happened against him and Messenbrink when Messenbrink teched him. So that was pretty wild to me.
Yeah, I think we have enough evidence that Caliendo's in a separate tier. Excuse me, Messenbrink, yes.
And so, yeah,
that show could have been
obviously
so much funnier if I didn't screw it up. Anyway, yeah, he's a freak. He's just otherworldly. I will be completely fine if he wins the Hodge, despite the rest of the competition. But no, I mean, Caliendo did an awesome job. He needed to break that open, and I think that's one of those things where, when you lose to a guy that badly like Messenbrink, you're like, that's a, I almost said something, that's kicking the crotch, we'll say, and it's like, hey, dude, you got to get like your ass in here and work harder and like figure it out. Like, you still have a long way to go if this is what you're going to plan on doing this year. I don't see Messenbrink or Caliendo changing weights anytime soon. They're probably going to be career 165s. So if this is the guy you got to get past, you got to get better, which means you got to start beating these other guys by more too. So, he did that here. That should be a good confidence booster for him going into conference tournament.
For sure. The only other note that I had was that I'm extremely impressed by Wyatt Hendrickson, and the more, yeah, and AKA Officer Farba, and the more I watch him, the more impressed I am, and I'm like, I honestly think that he gets the 2 seed, and that we see him and Gable in the finals. Because it's ridiculous, man. Like he is very good. He is very, very good. And not only that, but I have to acknowledge how spoiled we are with the heavyweight class that we are losing this year.
We still
Like
have Isaac Trimble though, so we're good.
we do. We certainly do. But he is also part of the mix of like how great this heavyweight class is. Like this top six. I mean, you can you can look at even the top seven, right? Like Heinzelman at 8 is 19-2. Slavakuski is at 7, but he's 14-5. But like Stevenson, Kirkley, Hendrickson, Trumbull, Treffin, Schultz. And it's just like the ability that we have with all these guys in the top half, right? The only guy that is coming back, as you said, is Trumbull at 4. And then it's Trumbull and Feldman that and Keeter, obviously, that we have that are all coming back next year, that are even in like what this like top 11. The rest of these guys are all seniors. Like we are spoiled. I think that heavyweight is clearly one of the deepest weights that we have. And as I was watching Hendrickson, I was thinking this, like, man, this is a deep weight. This is a very deep weight. And it's going to be a lot of fun once we hit that quarterfinal. I mean, not to say that it's never fun, but like the heavyweight quarterfinal is going to be great. And if I'm telling you right now, if you're going to be in Philly for NCAAs and you leave during the heavyweight matches, you're an idiot, because they have the potential to be better than the quarterfinals at like 57 or 74 for that matter. Like heavyweight is a match it's must see this year. And I see that every single time because we know how great Gable is. And I'm pretty sure he's if he's not the betting favorite, everybody's putting their money on Gable outside of the coaches of these respective guys. I get it. But like Wyatt Hendrickson, very good chance that he is in the final against Gable come Saturday night. That is, and I am, thoroughly impressed with everything he has done this year, being 18-0 and just mowing down the field as he does it.
Yeah, assuming he being Gable gets the win over Kirkley at Big Tens, he certainly deserves the number 2 seed at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 9 of the top 12 seniors going to be gone. And, all more power to guys like Jimmy Mullen and Ben Keeter for being, right there at 11 and 13 in the rankings as freshmen.
And Mullen wrestled really well against Trumbull this weekend too.
He did. So, he very much did. So those guys are going to be the future, along with Nick Feldman and a couple other guys in here, Pitzer. So
don't forget Nathan Taylor from Lehigh is back next year once Treffin leaves. And speaking of, I know you guys saw Treffin's takedown on Schultz. That was
beautiful.
Lifted a big boy up and slammed him down pretty hard.
Did Jordan Wood have flashbacks as he watched it?
I'm sure he did. Yeah, I'm sure he did. It was something special to watch there.
It was like an earthquake. It was wild.
Yeah.
I mean, hey, if you're gonna grab Colton Schultz's leg, and you better make sure that you finish, because and that you're not like wasting time down on a knee. Like he wasted 0 time. Like good shot up to his feet, big lift, cut double, finish. Like that was textbook. That was just completely gorgeous takedown. Yeah, I loved it.
It must have been like ripping an oak tree out of the ground. Jesus Christ.
Schultz is so big. And just like we said with Wood, just the way he can just wrap you, body lock you, chest wrap you. Like Schultz is just so strong there. And the way I'm sure Treffin and Wood and Zach Ray were all working on that kind of takedown. And here's how you finish it when you get in on them. You're not going to get many opportunities, but when you do, you got to.
Did Zach Ray ever take anybody down, or did he win every match 1-0?
No,
nobody knows. There's no
Zach Ray. You know what's funny about Zach Ray is he is a serious athlete. Like people don't realize that he is like a serious athlete. Like I can remember when, he was in college when I was training to be a fighter, and he was doing like backflips in the room and everything else. And like this dude's like a serious athlete. Like he's like nimble on his feet. and then was just like content to just beat the hell out of you and not score any points because he was just that confident because he didn't feel like he needed to. But he is like
Really good.
he was
Most boring guy to watch ever.
an athlete, man, but people just didn't realize it. Uh Before we jump to tonight's matches, as I said, are there any other matches? I know, Robbie, you said that there were some really good things that went down in the ACC last week. So floor is yours. Give us the lowdown on those ACC dual meets that finished off the season. As we now have, what is it, 3 champions? Is it?
3 champions. Yep. About half the conference. So like I said last week, it's a weird setup. It's all just based on results on final record in the conference, and they all ended 5-1. UNC beat Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech beat NC State. NC State beat UNC. So there's no way to split it. They all have head-to-head wins over each other, so it's kind of a weird way anyway. So with one loss, they all are co-champions for the regular season title. Virginia Tech hosted NC State and wrestled incredibly. Ended up 21-10, which I don't think anyone would have expected a score that lopsided in that duel. Virginia Tech won the toss-ups and got at least one upset with Mac Church beating Derek Fields in a very close match. It was a really good match, but just the vibe of that
too.
That was on paper. But like what I hit on earlier is that Vince hasn't hit an All-American before. Like he's wrestled some tough competition and he's wrestled top guys. Spratley is a big win, but he hasn't wrestled like some seasoned guys who have been through the grind like Eddie has. And I think that kind of showed with the way that match ended. I mean, Eddie getting that huge takedown and Matt returning right out kind of showed that grit and that experience edge that he has there. I think. I don't think that match goes the same next time it's wrestled. I think Vince is probably going to learn a lot from that because he's very intelligent as far as technique and adjustments go. So I'm interested to see how that plays out. But just kind of up and down, it was a great duel. Hippolito got a big win over Ed Scott in a match that somehow had a double stall, which never would have seen in my life. Would have thought that would happen. And no big throws. They were both really defensive and closed off, but wrestled really well. Mac Church got a big win. Lennox Wollock got absolutely destroyed by Matty Singleton. That's the best I've seen Matty look probably all year. Definitely the most offensive I've seen him all year, and just took it to Wolak. So it started on a big high note for Virginia Tech with upset wins for Hippolito and Mac Church, and then went the other way with upset wins from Singleton and Fishback. Beat TJ Stewart in kind of a weird match. Really low scoring, very defensive, ended on a weird scramble that TJ initiated with a shot and almost finished, but Fishback was able to sit through it, got him into a weird position, into a danger count that, Kevin Lynch is a fantastic ref, and I respect him a lot. He was very much out of position in that call. And it could certainly be argued that TJ was pinned. But he didn't get to the count on time. They reviewed it, counted danger, got the takedown call for the upset there. Andy Smith wrestled really well. Jimmy Mullen wrestled really well against Isaac Trumbull. Got a takedown on him late, but Isaac kind of showed that grit and got an escape with like 4 seconds left to get one of those points back, and that ended up being pretty big in the match. And then Virginia Tech ended on 2 huge notes with that win from Ventresca, and then a really gritty win with McGonigal over Kyorini. So it was a fantastic duel to be at. I'm glad I made the trip down there. It's always a fun rivalry duel to watch. The atmosphere was fantastic with that takedown from Ventresca. I've never heard it that loud there before. So it was really cool to see the crowd kind of get behind that. And then followed up with a nightcap, and UNC really put it on Stanford and had some huge wins. Ethan Oakley knocked off Tyler Knox, looked really great. And then Josh Ogunsanya beat Lorenzo Norman, who was making his return. So he's looked great. And it's UNC did everything they had to do this dual season to get part of that title. They had the big upset over Virginia Tech, and they handled their business in every other duel. So that's how we ended. And I think they have a lot of momentum going in to the postseason, even though they didn't wrestle well against Oregon State the next night. But I don't know, the ACC tournament's going to be really interesting, and I'm very interested to see how some of these seeds shake out, especially like 125, because Ventresca has a win over Vince Robinson, but Spencer Moore has a win over Ventresca and a loss to Robin. Or no, he lost to Robinson at the very end of the match.
Mhm.
So it's going to be interesting to see how that shakes out. There's a couple weights that are like that where guys have wins over each other, and I'm not sure. I need to look at the criteria again for their seeding to see how that's going to shake out, but it's going to be interesting. And I think it's going to be a really close uh, team score at the tournament as well. And you have a team like Stanford who has a couple really big studs who can make a big run, and that with team scoring for individual tournaments can make a huge difference. So it's going to be a fun one to watch.
ACC with a lot of action last week. Austin, anything in the Ivy or EIWA that happened last week? I know everybody in the EIWA is kind of still waiting to see if Crookham makes his return. You were watching out for a lot of those entries into the tournament last week. Um, any news, anything that you're hearing with anything happening at Lehigh or any of the other EIWA or Ivy League schools?
Yeah, so Matty Lopes from Lehigh wrestled at the George Mason Patriot Open unattached, so still has his red shirt. Wrestled his 3 matches to get to 8 matches on the year at 133, so he is eligible to ranked in the coaches' rankings. It'll be interesting to see who Lehigh puts in there to designate as their starter for coaches to rank. Um, I'm not sure if that's going to be him or Crookham. Either way, it doesn't matter. That doesn't matter because they can still put someone else in for EIWAs, and those have to be in early next week here. So only a few more days of this not knowing. I'm hoping we find out soon. It's kind of stressing me out, but I think we'll find out eventually. Cornell had a big senior day. Guys like Julian Ramirez, Chris Foca. They celebrated their senior day. Went out with a bang, a win over Bucknell. And that was pretty much it. EIWA and Ivies. Not a whole lot going on this weekend.
Yeah, I'm hopeful that Crookham does come back, right? Like he's been out for quite a while, and you make sure that Lopes one has his red shirt, but two has his RPI. That's it feels very safety net ish. Like there's going to be a wrestling match in the room behind closed doors to test things out to see if Crookham can go, and if he can, then we see him at EIWAs. Or we don't see him at EIWAs. We just see him entered and he gets an at large, which I'm sure he would get. Right. So like we've seen things like that before as well. Right. We saw Carter do it last year. We've seen, Nolf do it. And I mean, when we had him and Kemmerer were the double sixth place at Big Ten. So we've seen a number of guys that have forfeit out and gotten the at large. And so maybe that
Do you
happens
think
with
he'd
Crookham.
have
Maybe it doesn't.
enough to qualify though? Because if he
Yeah,
only
he's
wrestles,
only yeah,
he
he's
only
only
got five
5-1.
matches.
Yeah, so he would have to have at least 3 to
At
be
least three. Yeah.
coaches ranking eligible, right? If that even matters, win percentage would be there. So yeah, if Crookham does go, the IWA only gets 2 spots most likely at that weight class. If Lopes goes, they'll get 3. So Crookham's gonna have to steal one and make the finals there, which if he's healthy shouldn't be an issue. But where's he going to be seated? Is he going to be the top seed? He barely wrestled this year. So it'll be really interesting to see how things unfold here.
As it's yeah, it's funny. Like as good as this season has been, with a ton of parity and big duels and awesome finishes. I mean, the dual meet season coming to a close last weekend was great, but it has been an injury plague season up and down, right? Like there are so many injuries that have happened in every single weight class, and guys that are hoping for a medical or
We're hoping the tape will hold them together through the rest of the
right?
year, like
Like it,
teamers.
it is right. Like it is rough for guys this year. So I'm hoping for a great finish to the season. And obviously all guys are banged up, but it's going to be a photo finish if guys can drag their leg across the finish line or drag their shoulders across the finish line to make sure that they finish. Um, with that said, let's jump to some all-star wrestling. Going down tonight is the FloWrestling All-Star. What is it? FloWrestling Night in America. Lee versus Ono is the headliner. I'm going to talk about the last three matches in here. There's a very long list of wrestling, but for the sake of time, we'll talk about these three big matches, and then we'll each kind of pick one outside of these top three that we're really interested in. First one, Zahid versus Trent Hidley. Obviously, Hidley wasn't the original guy who was supposed to be in there. Aaron Brooks was supposed to be wrestling in there. A rematch of the singlet pool that we saw at the Olympic trials. But Brooks is out. Trent Hidley is in. And this could make for, we've seen these guys wrestle before, not the first time, but it's a little bit different now. Certainly a little bit different when these guys are hitting the mat as we've seen how well they've been competing as of late. What are your guys' thoughts on Valencia versus Hidley? And who do you think wins this match? Robbie, I'll start with you.
I'm always going to roll with Hidley.
Yeah.
Very, very different styles. And that's going to be really kind of what dictates this match. If Trent's able to, get to his underhooks and use that to create some offense or to control the mat, I think that slows down Valencia enough to stop his offense. And I think that gives Trent the edge. But if Valencia is able to get around that, then I think he's more dynamic offensively than Trent is. So I think that's really going to be what dictates the match. But I'm going to roll with Hoagie.
Austin?
I don't know. I think I like Zahid. Um, this is probably a silly question, but he's with Cowboy RTC now,
Yes,
correct?
he
Mhm.
is.
He's been
Yes,
training
he
with David
is.
Taylor and those guys, and yeah, you just got to think some of that is gonna change his style a little bit, tweak some things that maybe he was missing, adding to his repertoire. Um, yeah, I think I like Zahid, but Hiley's just so freaking good with those underhooks. Push out points are gonna probably be plentiful for him, but I like Zahid just to get a few more takedowns, probably.
Yeah, I like Zahid too. The Cowboy piece was certainly something I was going to bring up, wrestling with David Taylor every day and adding some stuff to his game plan.
And
Um,
Gary Traub.
yeah, right.
Gas tank.
Um, but like that's the other thing. It's like it's not like Zahid hasn't been wrestling internationally a ton, right? Like he beat up Marsteller, I think, in the finals of the most recent tournament they went
Mhm.
to. Like I think it was like 10-0.
Yeah.
It's not like he's a easy guy to score on.
Which that matchup
Um,
just looks funny. Just that's
oh
the one
right,
of the
yeah,
weirdest.
just the completely different body types in every way. Um, I just think he's gonna get it done. He's seen Iranian underhooks, right? Like Trent's got great underhooks, I know, but it's not like this is something. What is this? I've got an overhook, but I don't like it here, right? Like he's gonna know what to do. He's gonna clear it. He's gonna go from there, or he's just not gonna get in it. But I think he's gonna get it done. And he's Team Adidas, three-stripe life.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go with Valencia here too. I feel like his length gives Trent a little bit of trouble. And, as we said, Trent wants to be in that underhook position even more so in freestyle than he ever did in folk style. Like we've seen him really utilize it in folk style, but freestyle, it's a game changer in freestyle form. So, but I think that Zahid wrestling from space a little bit, as he's, prone to do, is what really opens things up. And it's gonna force Hidley to get a little bit more tactical with his attacks and things like that too. So I'm going Zahid. Um, the next one is Takatani versus David Carr, and I'm really interested in this one because I want to see is is Carr the next guy at 74 for us? Obviously, there's going to be a number of guys that we have at 74. 74 is literally our strongest weight class. I think that, over these last couple of years, we could have had a host of guys winning titles at 74. It didn't just need to be Dake and Burroughs. We could have had a number of guys at 74 that could have done well. But Dake and Burroughs hasn't really effectively put any sort of announcement out that I've seen to say that he's done. But, I don't think he's coming back at 79 this year. But it's going to be interesting to see who steps into these weight classes. And is David Carr that next guy? Obviously, Takatani had, that blowout win over Dake, beating him 20-12 at the Olympics and just kind of living on Dake's ankles. So it's going to be interesting to see how Carr handles this match and what he's learned. We've seen him wrestling with Burroughs, and he's been at Penn, and he's obviously at Iowa State as well. And he's been kind of all over and making sure that he's getting his training in. So we'll see what he brings to the table, but it's tough, right? I have to go with Takatani. I hate to pick against David Carr, and I will happily eat crow if I am wrong on this one. But when you see how dynamic Takatani is and his attacks, it's tough to bet against that. Austin, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with you. I hate to sound anti-American and pick against Carr. But Takatani, world's or Olympic silver medalist, kind of took it to Dake, who Dake has been our best guy there for a few years now. But I would love to see Carr, at least keep it close, prove that he could be the next guy, like you said, and keep it tight with these guys. Takatani is legit. Excited to see him wrestle though. Watching these Japanese guys wrestle is really entertaining.
Robbie?
Maybe that the match at Oklahoma State was just a warm up to get us ready to see the top Japanese wrestlers. And that's really what the plan was all along. I think same thing. I mean, Takatani is proven. He's shown how good he is. We know what we're getting there. And we haven't seen David as much on the world scene yet. So we don't know where he's at. This is going to be a great measuring tape to see where he stacks up with one of the best in the world. But I think it's hard to pick against Takatani here with what we've seen from him and what we know he's proven to be. Carr has a lot of potential, and we know that. We've seen him in folk style, what he's capable of. But until he shows some of those things on an international scene, I think you can't pick him against a guy like Takatani.
Oh, but you can.
Watch
this.
What will you?
So first of all, Dake versus Takatani. I'm gonna look back on it and I'm gonna think that was more a game plan. I'm gonna attack this, and once it started to work and Dake wasn't able to use that head pinch that he's just gotten so accustomed to using against everybody, then Takatani smelled blood and just kept getting after him. So I think if you wrestle that match again and you're Kyle Dake and you kind of know that outcome, that's a completely different. He wrestles that match very differently the next time, right? So
That was
I don't
paddling though.
Yeah, I don't think it was indicative though of how good Takatani is and equally how bad Dake is. You know what I mean? Like it was just a bad day to have a bad match. Also, if you remember, Takatani celebrated taking second place. And at the time, I thought that was really cool. But now I think it's a loser move. And I think Takatani's a loser. And I think he's going to lose to David Carr. And then he's going to celebrate because he loves losing.
I'm waiting for an American flag backdrop to just like lower behind Kevin.
Oh,
just like
There
we go.
There you go. Just stars and stripes just drop down behind him.
It's not exactly the American flag, but it'll work.
It'll work. It'll work. It's there. Yeah, I mean, I would love to see David Carr win. He's one of my favorites. It's our moms are very tight as well. My mom sat next to his mom at who's number one his senior year, and they just became super close. So my mom doesn't watch this show, thank God, or else she would be very upset that I picked against David Carr or anyone in the Carr family. Now the main event, Spencer Lee versus Ono. Who are we taking in this one? Obviously, Ono is bigger, but I mean, it's not that far off in weight. I think Spencer could certainly wrestle 61. He just chooses to be at 57. That's Spencer's weight. That's just what it is. Um, but man, I I'm picking Spencer. I am. I think Spencer gets on top, and I don't think it's gut wrench. I think it's leg lace. I think he goes back to an old faithful that he won a junior world title with in, what was that, 2017. So I'm picking Spencer, but I think it's going to be a great match, and I think that we see a different level of Spencer after losing at the Olympics. We see some different tactics, we see some different attacks, but ultimately, same Spencer, but a little bit new bag. So what are you guys thinking, Kevin? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think Spencer Lee wins. He's been so good. I mean, once again, I always try to do this when I want to create a narrative for somebody that I like when they lose, except for Takatani. But Lee lost in the Olympic finals, and he didn't want to bring the medal back. He was pissed. He wasn't celebrating. So I think he's back there grinding away and working, and he's going to go show everybody what he's been working on in this event.
Is he down in the room right now working out?
He is.
Course he
He
is.
is. He is down in the room right now working out. Robbie, what are your thoughts here? Who's your pick?
So it's a catch weight, which, I mean, like you said, it's not a huge difference. Even at their separate weight classes, it's 4 kilos. It's not huge difference here. So, I mean, I don't think that's going to be an issue. I think what Spencer's going to have to negate is the speed of Ono, because it's stupidly fast. And that was on full display at the Olympics. So I think he's going to have to rely on his counter offense, and I think that's not a bad thing for him to have to rely on. And like you said, if he gets on top, I think that's his spot. So if he can get to, if he can work off of some of Ono's shots and get his counter offense, I think he'll be fine. I think he gets, home mat advantage there, having it in Iowa. I think this is going to be a big difference for him and the crowd behind him. So I'll take lead there. I think it's going to be a fun match though.
Austin?
Yeah, it was kind of looking back at Ono's. Flo did a nice behind the numbers for the matchups here, and they gave all a list of wins for Ono, and he won 2024 Worlds at 61, and he pretty much teched everyone going through it, including Vito, which is impressive. But then you think, oh, it's 2024, all the Olympians weren't there, so a bit of a watered down field, right, if you may. Um, so now that I come to that conclusion, I'm talking to myself here. I feel like Claunch, but yeah, I think Spencer's the guy. Just being at Carver Hawkeye and
Yeah.
a little bit of a chip on his shoulder, lost to a Japanese guy in the finals there. I think he probably wants to avenge that loss, and do it for America.
And the Beatles.
There we go.
There you go.
Who were
No,
from it?
Yoko Ono.
That there.
Oh man,
there
there
you
you
go.
go.
Yeah, I,
That was a
I
deep cut.
that
Thanks.
was,
Yeah.
it really was. It really, truly was.
Yeah.
I think this card's going to be great though. There's a number of matches. I think, what is it, like 12 or so matches that are going down tonight, which are going to be a ton of fun. Outside of the three that we just talked about, the one that I'm excited to see, or at least looking forward to seeing, is Nate Jackson and Kennedy Monday. Kennedy Monday,
That'd be
since
fun.
returning back to the mat, has looked very good.
Yeah, he
And
has.
it's
Surprisingly so.
yeah, and he's been putting in the work. I will say that.
Mhm.
Not to say that he didn't when he was at UNC. Obviously, he was putting in the work, but this is a little bit different, right? He's training with his dad, and it's just a different level of focus for him, and he's looked really, really good. So I'm looking forward to seeing him against Nate Jackson. I think he just beat Nate Jackson overseas as well. I think, they go all the way over there and then end up just wrestling Americans a lot of the time.
Mhm.
Um, but I want to see how Kennedy matches up. I want to see how, where he's at in the field, right? So that's the one that I have circled. What other ones did you guys have circled when you looked at this? Robbie, what was yours?
I got two. I think it's pretty easy to know which two I'm going with. My guy JILO and Marcus Coleman's going to be one of the opening matches. Jay's done great since he's got on the freestyle scene. Training up there in Philly's been really good for him, and I mean he's been taking a lot of international trips, been competing a lot, and he's looked solid. Haven't seen as much competition out of Coleman, so I think ILO's got the edge there. Just always look forward to watching Jay wrestle. He's a great guy, and I think he does everything the right way, and he's fun to watch. And then Andonian and Austin Gomez. I saw Bryce this weekend when I was down in Blacksburg. He looks great, looks healthy. He actually is finally healthy for the first time in a very long time. Um, so having him at full strength is always fun to watch. And I think he's a matchup nightmare for Gomez and very, very different styles. But I like to see Andoni in there. I mean, two Hokies in a row to beat Gomez. That'll be fun.
Mhm. Kevin?
I mean, that's the match. Gomez and Andonian. I don't even need the first ones we picked. I'll just watch that one. That's fine. I'll turn it off.
I will watch anything that Bryson Donian does on a
Yeah.
wrestling mat because it's normally a lot of fun.
Yeah. And Gomez has looked good in his competitions that he's been in. Again, I watched the medal matches at the tournament. I can't think of the name of it, but he placed at whatever that tournament
Zagreb.
was. There you go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Zagreb.
Yep. And looked good doing it. It looked big. Looked real big.
He did.
So yeah. So I'm excited to see what a bigger, stronger Austin Gomez is able to do. Maybe he'll be able to throw people further.
Scared money don't make money.
That's right.
Austin, what other match are you looking at?
Yeah, Andoni and Gomez gets my vote. Someone's going to go flying. Someone's going to be exposing backs multiple times, just expose the other guy's back. It's going to be a lot of flip-flop and spaghetti wrestling, whatever you want to call it. Do want to see DeSanto, though. Haven't really seen him compete in a while, personally. Him versus Seth Gross, just different style matchups. Could be fun just to see those guys go at it.
Little dudes grabbing
Kimura.
arms. Yeah.
A lot of unorthodox. I think there's going to be a lot of 2-on-1 from Seth Gross.
Yeah.
Yep.
And a lot of elbow C grip going on from Austin DeSanto. So it's going to be
That checks out.
it's going to be a fight for ties for sure in this one, and neither these ties do not match.
We should have an elbow control clock. See who has the
It
most
is
time.
it is an elbow control type of match. I love this card though. I think I will give Flo some props of putting this together, and not only that, like I love how now we have a lot more in wrestling to have these guys have sustainable lives. Kyle Snyder put out a tweet. He went 2-0 at PWL and said it was like such a professionally run event, and they do the best with it and everything else. I wish that we were able to have some sort of sustainable league here in the States. Maybe this is the closest that we're going to get to doing something like this. I can remember when COVID was going on, and we're looking at who are we going to get on this card, because the guys want to compete and we got to be able to do it in a safe manner and this and that and whatever else. And this is where those new cards kind of came to play in wrestling. And obviously we've seen them before, but like it was really necessary during COVID, and it's one of those things where I'm glad it hasn't gone away, right? So happily that we'll have some freestyle wrestling going on a week where we're in between folk style tournaments. At least dual meets ended last weekend. Conferences aren't until next weekend. Perfect
Timing's
time
fantastic.
it is fantastic. So we'll give props to the guys at FloWrestling for putting this on. What do you guys think of how wrestling has become more sustainable, and how it is truly a profession now, where it's not just, all right, I'm done wrestling
Now I'm
and
going to
I'm
coach.
going now I'm going to coach, right? Like or I'll wrestle for a little bit, try and win some world medals, but I also have to have a part-time job on the side or a full-time job on the side. What are your guys' thoughts on how wrestling has made this transition into kind of full-on leagues like we have now?
I
It's the
mean, it's been,
best.
yeah, it's awesome.
Like,
I mean, I think it started with like the Living the Dream Fund was a huge step in the right direction to, getting guys money for their performance. And that changed a lot of lives and opened a lot of doors. But now it's sustainable enough that we have backers that are financing entire RTC clubs. We have people traveling all the time, going to multiple international tournaments and having success there, to the point that we have significantly more depth than we've ever had up and down the lineup in all three styles. So it's hard to be an American wrestling fan and be, you know, have bad outlook on how things are right now. It's been awesome to see the growth of it, and like, speaking personally, like seeing Jay go from being a pretty low recruit at UVA to having some success there and just continuing to get better and better, and now he's successful on the international scene. Like, that wouldn't have been an option 10 years ago. He would have been done and he would have been coaching high school somewhere. And that's, nothing wrong with that, but that was the reality. And, a guy like him having the opportunity to continue wrestling and be successful and be fully supported that way, it's awesome.
it's just a testament to the people who invest in it. I think it's been many, many, many years that people have really wished, the athletes have wished that this was an option, and at the end of the day, people just needed to start investing and making it happen. And then the results, it doesn't happen overnight. It takes a long time of this long-term investment to start seeing the results and the buildup of it all. Um, it's been said before, but certainly the success that Jordan Burroughs had over the years, and everything certainly helps as well, because you start to see, like, hey, if we keep investing in this guy, oh, what about these guys? These guys are doing well too. Hey, David Taylor, if he bumps up to 86, what happens then, right? Like, so it took a long time for us to get here, but man, we're seeing it, and it's just been such a cool thing to start kind of trying to predict who are these next guys going to be? Who are these college guys that are going to turn into something? Is Caleb Henton going to be good at freestyle? Who knows? I guess we'll hopefully get to see one day,
Might
right?
rip some
So
people's heads off.
he might. Who knows? Do you know?
I remember in 2000, yeah, he's going to be good. In 2011, I remember sending a check to Jordan Burroughs in Lincoln to buy, and all I see is the Got Double shirt.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And that's where we've come, right? That was used to be their primary backing, was money from fundraisers, money from doing clinics, money from doing camps, money from selling shirts. And that was how they supported themselves to scrape by enough to train and continue their dream. And now we've gotten to the point where, Jordan is an outlier, clearly, but I mean, he's got fucking Ralph Lauren deal. Like, it's crazy. It's crazy to see how far we've come in this sport.
Yeah, it just goes to show, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I just feel like the US has just been more competitive since this kind of RTC and investment into the sport. We got multiple guys wrestling at world levels, and you have multiple guys that could be top in the world. They just can't beat some of these Americans, and I feel like we've really caught up to the Russians, since before this, and just it's like, I think Holmes said it, it's prolonging these guys' careers. These guys are wrestling until they're 30, 35, and not just 26, 27 going into coaching. So yeah, it goes so much further than it used to, and it gives these guys, more opportunities and more chances to showcase themselves and become the best.
You could look back at the cycles, and we usually have one or two guys, you know what I mean? And maybe up until 2012. And then
Yeah.
we started to have like a lot of dudes who stick around, go to a couple cycles, or maybe they get beat by somebody else who's stuck around and just waiting for their time. So it's been great.
We're now to a point where we're spoiled, right? Like, think about the Olympics last year. We had 0 golds on the men's side, and everybody was like, "This was a horrible year." Like everyone was so upset, and it's like, guys, we brought home a lot of medals. Like there were a lot of medals that were brought back in wrestling,
Turns out
and
winning an Olympic gold is hard to do too.
right, like it really is. And not for nothing, we also saw on the women's side how great we are on that side. Like that is an explosive growth that is happening on the women's side in wrestling. And the fact that we have so many great girls that are, I mean, right now primarily wrestling at Iowa because they have such a sustainable program and the infrastructure around it. But we're seeing more and more and more of these different programs that are having a lot more infrastructure, right? And they're a lot more sustainable. But like the fact that these things are now like it's now able to happen, right? Like I can remember, what was it, Flips headphones, right? Like when that
Oh
was
my
a big
God.
deal, right? Like think about like
Yeah.
the things that we have had in wrestling, right? Flips headphones. You're talking about sending a check to Jordan Burroughs for one of his t-shirts. I remember, when before JB and I were even, remotely friends, he came and did a clinic in Easton, and I interviewed him for the first time. And, I took home a autographed poster that I gave to my nephew of Jordan Burroughs, right? Like it was just like things like that, we obviously have more camps and clinics and stuff like that, but like the fact that these guys have their own shoe now, they have, they're making more deals with contracts, and the women are doing the same thing. And it's just, it's amazing that we have the infrastructure that we have, and it is a sustainable thing for these men and women to do. And I hope that it continues. I hope it gets even bigger. I think, with NIL, you're able to build these things in even more because they're attaching them to the RTC for some schools. Not every school is doing it, but a lot
Yeah,
of the
not every school
schools,
pays their athletes.
I mean, yeah, I mean, well, put it
That's what
this
we learned
way.
on Twitter this week.
Put it this way, and I'm in my mind, I'm thinking of Oklahoma State and how Joey McKenna is now going to Oklahoma State to train with
Which is
Cowboy
a
RTC,
huge move.
which is a
Yeah.
huge move, right?
Yeah.
And we're seeing how much David Taylor has talked about. We're going to invest in the RTC, and it's this past week was Joey McKenna, but before that it was Zahid Valencia and RBY, right? Like that made these moves. So he is truly doing the things he said he was going to do, but like the money is now there for these guys to have sustainable futures where they can compete until they're like, all right, I'm done competing and it's time for me to get into coaching. And it's an easier transition for them into the real world and into not being a competitor, where they can continue to still be in the wrestling world and contribute if that's what they want to do. Right. So like, and then not for nothing, I mean, you've got guys like Chance Marceller who has his own club as well, right? So who's able to give back to a sport that's given him so much. So like it is amazing, and it's great for these guys that they can do the things that they want. Guys and men and women, I should say, they can do the things that they want to do in the sport of wrestling, and they're not pushed out as soon as they graduate.
On
Any other
a
final
side note
thoughts?
from that, shout out to Sarah Hildebrandt, hanging
Yes.
up the shoes and taking a coaching job with USA Wrestling. I think that's a huge move. She's a brilliant mind in the sport, and she's going to be, a huge part of the continued success of our women's program. And I think that's awesome.
Agreed. Any other shout outs you guys want to give?
I want to shout out real quick Ann Arbor Pioneer High School. I grabbed this from my mom's house this weekend when I was back in Ann Arbor. Doug Bernard and Bill and Craig Petoskey and current
And it
head coach.
still fits too. Like
It does
take
still
note,
fit. Yeah.
still fits.
Yeah.
Shout
We're
out for
proud.
you being an AA in high school.
Hey, yeah, I love it. John Fisher and then Rayvon Foley, Ann Arbor Pioneers greatest. So there we
Rayvon
go.
Foley.
Mm-hmm.
Austin, any shout outs?
No, I guess not.
Austin's got
Come prepared.
nothing. Austin's got
Shout out to
nothing.
Kevin's coat.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
Jalen Hurts. Yeah.
Well, I guess I'll give a shout out to Claude. She had me on the podcast last night. We had some fun on Blood Round, and it was good time. Good time chatting. Talking to him twice in a row this week. I might need a break, but it was,
You might need AA.
there we
All
go.
right. Good times.
I'm gonna give a shout out to the one and only Sammy Sasso. I know, we've talked about this offline, but it looks like his college season is done. Um, from what Earl, I believe, told us, it's gonna be Cannon going forward, and Cannon is in the rankings at number 11 for Ohio State now. So it looks like Sasso, it sucks to see something so tragic happen to like such a good kid, and he wanted to come back and win an NCAA title, and everybody back home in Lehigh Valley loves him, and everybody was behind him, and wanted him to come back and be that same fierce cradling kid that he used to be. But it's turns out it's tough to come back from a gunshot wound, you know what I mean? So but no, shout out to Sasso. The kid is ultimate awesome kid, and I think that he's going to do some great things in wrestling, and whether it's on the mat or in the coaching chair, which he already does a lot of coaching with I believe Dark Knight back home and stuff like that. So that is my shout out to him. And then hopefully I didn't talk too much this show, and if I did, I really don't give a damn.
At least you're not wearing a Nike shirt.
I'm not wearing a Nike shirt. And it's funny because I realize that our names are like nowhere to be found unless you're looking at this on the Intermat website. But we've all been around way too long to be labeled by the shit that we're wearing.
I agree with you, Ryan Holmes.
So yeah,
Yeah.
right. Like it's just, but yeah, the me talking too much thing, it's it's kind of funny, and I laugh at it every time I see it. And the only reason that I even said anything about it was because somebody said that I was talking too much. It's just like hosting a show. I'm going to talk more than the rest of you guys because I have to ask the questions. And this isn't first take where Molly just kind of sits there and lets the rest of the panel talk about all these things. I actually know what I'm talking about, and I actually cover wrestling for a living. So I'm not just going to offer up a question and not put my own 2 cents into it as well. So, but no, so you can keep the I talk too much comments coming, but that just means that you're watching the show. So I appreciate it, but you can also comment on the things that we say. I'd much rather be called out for being wrong than for talking too much, because I'm going to do that. It's literally a talk show. And if you're not tired of listening to me, you can listen to me on Blood Round, because I'm going to be on with Kevin coming up probably next week, I believe. So
Yeah, you are.
we're going to keep talking. It's just what's going to happen. But as
I might
always,
talk
gentlemen,
more on that one though. We'll see.
you are, because you are the host of that damn show. So that's kind of how it works here, people. Is you are the host of that show. But gentlemen, as always, love chatting with you, and I do love the comments, especially from Slap the Mat. That guy is awesome. I hope he had a safe road trip. It looked like he was driving from, was it New York? Yeah, from Rochester, New York to the duel to Iowa versus Oklahoma State. So hopefully he had a safe
That's a
trip.
drive.
So
Goodness.
shout out to him. But yeah, people keep liking, subscribing, commenting, all of it. Next week we'll be back with our picks for our different conferences. ACC, EIWA, Ivy, Big Ten, and we will also look at some of the others. We'll talk Big 12. We'll see who picks Ferrari and who picks Little. We'll talk a little
Picking
bit.
Little.
Yeah, we'll talk a
See, no.
little bit of these other conferences as well. I know that's Pac-12 too, but Pac-12 and Big 12, we'll talk about them, even though there is not 12 teams in them. We'll discuss those as well. But as I said, gentlemen, it's always fun to chop it up with you and talk some wrestling. And we'll see you again next time.